Yeah, this countdown is excellent.
Mhm.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's community call. My name is Teo Gonzalez. I'll reintroduce myself here in a couple minutes again. Really excited to be here with Justin and Marcos. But really, the purpose of today's call is to get an opportunity to spotlight some awesome things going on within our community. Justin is really the superstar for today. My role is to just kind of be facilitating conversation. And just to give you a lay of the land for what we're going to be doing for the next 30 minutes or so, really you're going to hear from Justin more as to what he does at Next After, Avid AI, how he incorporates Airbyte, what is it that he's looking to accomplish, along with some cool insights as to how you can think about things in the nonprofit space. We'll open it up from there to questions. So I have some that I'm going to be sharing with Justin, that he can share his feedback from the Airbyte side of the house, all the way to how he thinks about data platforms. And we'll really save a large chunk of our time so that you all can ask questions of Justin yourselves. This is meant to be a community call, so we want you to feel very empowered to ask those questions, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that said, thank you again for joining. My name is Teo Gonzalez. I manage our partnerships, and I'm going to actually pass it over to Justin now. He has a presentation that he'll share, which will include a broader introduction. So Justin, it's off to you.
Great, thanks, Tio. I'm going to go ahead and share a screen here and see if it works as smoothly as it did before. That's always the question. Okay,
It's
look at
always
that.
kind of like the hold your breath moment, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Good deal. Well, just a little bit of background on me and my experience and how we ended up, being so involved with Airbyte. So first off, I'm a Southern California native. I'm currently in the North Texas, kind of Dallas area. But my first 16 years of my career was more in the web and application development side of things, working for a large nonprofit. But nonprofit life is a lot like startup life. This meant everything from running infrastructure to UX design to all of the things, because we didn't have people for all those seats. So you wear a lot of hats in the nonprofit space. And again, feels very much like this early stage startup life that I'm currently in. So it's all familiar again. And so I spent about 7 years at a nonprofit digital agency called Next After. And this was a pivot for me. It really shifted me squarely into the data space, both data engineering and analysis. And so my core focus in that time period was building data pipelines and presentations for large nonprofits like Charity Water, American Heart, a lot of these organizations you think of when you hear the term nonprofit or NGO. And so my time there sort of revealed how much first party data exists in the nonprofit space and how little exists to sort of wire that in. So we built a lot of pipelines and models and heuristics to be able to identify and categorize and work with that data. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the specifics and what led us to Airbyte in a moment. And then we've actually taken and planted out the data infrastructure work that we did at Next After as a standalone SaaS startup called Avid AI. So we're actually taking that platform to try to be able to reach more organizations with it than the 5,200 organizations that we can work with at Next After. And there's a few things that are unique. You can see all my experience is sort of bound up in the nonprofit space outside of freelancing that I've done outside the space. But there's some unique things about nonprofits. One is that nonprofits struggle with technology. There's just been a huge lag in getting them up to speed. So a lot of nonprofit specific CRMs are non-API native or are outdated. A lot of these organizations don't have data engineering roles. They may have some traditional IT, but a lot of them don't have a lot of resources to do this in-house, yet they produce, as much or more first-party data than most for-profit organizations do. And then there's also an aspect of this that there's a higher risk aversion for nonprofits. There aren't stakeholders sort of driving that profit motive. And this means that, you sort of fall back on being safe. You just want to not do any worse than you did last year, but it means that there's a lot of opportunity for really great causes that's being left on the table. I've always viewed data as sort of the way to unlock that, help people see that the status quo is actually sometimes more dangerous, than whatever risk you're taking on. And these are amazing people. I can't say enough good things about the amazing folks we've worked with in the nonprofit space. They care about their missions, and they're also really scrappy. A lot of these people are self-taught. They don't have degrees in this. They don't necessarily have the resources that you would in a lot of for-profit organizations, but they're able to pull things together and make it work. And it really is a wonder how much they can get done. And again, it reminds me of that early startup energy that exists in this space. It's just without the same resources and funding behind it. And one other thing that I wanted to just point out, because I think this goes into sort of the why of both my story and what we're doing, is that generosity is a miracle. And it's not a very logical miracle. It's something that, giving away the resources that you can use for you and your own doesn't really jive with what we know about humanity. It's something that we tend to hoard and protect the things that we have and that we've earned. And so it's important to remember that, you can't really reason your way into generosity. And we found this in our vision at Next After was to sort of unleash the most generous generation in the history of the world. I guess we didn't aim very small there, but when we engaged in this, we started by, we wanted to become the donor. We wanted to understand what this experience was like. So we've given to thousands of organizations. We've given away millions of dollars, giving gifts to organizations as small as $20, as large as $5,000, and then understanding, how do they engage with us? How do they engage differently across different channels? So when we think about multi-channel or omni-channel strategies, what does that look like? How do they cultivate that relationship? How do they report back on what they're doing? And what we found in all of this research and giving that we did, and all these research studies that we've published, is that everyone's doing things differently. So the question is, what is actually best? And there were a lot of espoused best practices that are out there, but we were very experimentation focused in what we do. And what we found is, this is an example of an experiment we ran with a large child sponsorship organization, just to give you a taste of how we go about this. And this was during COVID, and a lot of sponsors couldn't maintain their commitments to the children they were sponsoring. And this wasn't just a monetary commitment. They were writing letters back and forth with these children and engaging with them. This was providing medical care and education to these kids. And so this was a big relational deal. And so they came up with this concept to help kids keep their sponsors in that time of uncertainty. And this was a campaign they ran. This is the control version. And someone, thought about it and said, well, we're talking to existing child sponsors. What happens if we just change this just a little bit and say, let's help a sponsor keep their child instead of a child keep their sponsor? And what we found was that 119% more people gave to that treatment version, that was really empathizing with the way that those existing sponsors feel and how they could put themselves in the shoes of the person who may not be able to maintain that commitment right now. And this is something we found again and again in our experimentation, is it drives us to be more empathetic and to remember that these are real people we're working with. These aren't just, sort of faceless names on the other side of the internet. This is another example of, sort of what we view as the industry espoused best practices. Marketing emails, we all see it. All of our companies tend to send email that looks a lot like this. This is on brand, it fits their style guide. This is actually an email from Save the Children Italy. And our team had actually been out doing a training with a lot of the different international Save the Children's. They were in Spain at the time. And this Italy group was in this workshop all day, looking at these different experiments we had ran and learning from some members of our team that run our institute. And there was a crisis that happened that night. There was this bombing in Yemen, and they had to scramble a campaign because they had people on the ground ready to help in Yemen that they needed support for. And so we tested this marketing style email template against something really relational, super simple. My Italian is subpar at best, and so I won't read this, but you can feel the difference. It's just very personal and engages someone like you would any friend or colleague, and just leans into that, lets them know what happened, and invites them to support. And for them, this led to 4 times as many donations compared to the marketing email. And that happens for two reasons. One is that there's a benefit to inboxing, so there is a technical aspect there. But the other is that we've learned in all of our experimentation that people give to people, not to these faceless marketing machines that we often build. And when we remember that, it helps us to empathize and engage. And we have thousands of these experiments, over 7,000 these days. And something that's cool from the Next After side is we've always wanted to find ways to give back. Not every organization can work within an agency, but we try to open source as much of our content as we can. And so it's my shameless plug. If you're in the nonprofit space, if you volunteer with nonprofits, there's free research that's available here. You can actually go through those 7,000 experiments and see what we've tested, how it's worked. And if you don't have your own data, you can learn from people who are testing, and you can go test it yourself because it might be different for you. But we'd much rather be grounded in some type of truth. But with this, we're generating, massive amounts of our own data from additional testing platforms, plus all of the analytical data you would be used to, in any business setting. And again, at huge scales for some of these organizations. And so with that, we learned everything required data. That wasn't really our core business, but we needed to be able to analyze that data. We needed to get pipelines in. And so scaling with custom code just didn't really work great for that. It was limited by the experience of folks on our team. It was limited by the different sources and integration endpoints we had. It was often a lot of specialized code that was really doing the same thing. And then running and maintaining that became a huge challenge. And so we started looking for solutions. We had used a bunch of platforms, Blendo, Stitch, and the Singer project that was associated there. We were on Fivetran. And in some cases, some of these had connectors that others didn't. Some of them had connectors that didn't work well, so we had to use a different platform for it. And we just ended up with this giant mess of content. And it just sort of, blows your mind, and it was hard to work with. And each of these platforms had big downsides for us: maintainability and reliability and custom code, and then all these different challenges we had where, building a connector in Singer, if anyone ever tried it, was probably harder than just building it yourself. And so it didn't live up to that promise of kind of the open source, ETL or ELT. Fivetran, costs, custom connectors weren't available at the time. And we knew this wasn't our core business, but we couldn't actually do anything without moving this data. And so that's when we discovered Airbyte. And this was late 2021 that we first got involved. I think that first week we had a proof of concept up with one of our custom connectors. And it instantly sort of turned our eye. And then we immediately started migrating. We moved all of our custom connectors for the first 6 months, which was kind of the burning use case, got rid of all custom code that we were running there. And then we started moving over very, very large historical accounts. We have some of the largest nonprofit accounts for platforms like HubSpot. Overall, we're talking trillions of rows there. And so a lot of data to move. And it took a little while for us to get those sorted, get them backfilled, and then prioritize our time. And then more recently, we started moving everything that we created in the CDK over to low code and builder connectors, just to make it easier for more people on our team to contribute, improve maintainability, and take advantage of a lot of the performance improvements that the Airbyte team has been perpetually rolling out to low code connectors. And so now we're down to just one CDK connector. It's not a REST API, and so it's its own special thing. But it's something that we've been able to continue using and building and maintaining. And we're fully deployed in the Google Cloud Platform stack. So it's all the Google things: Secrets Manager, IAP for auth, and so we're very deeply invested on that side, running on Kubernetes, and it's just been really a great experience from that standpoint. And all of a sudden, that we weren't spending all of our time doing the plumbing, we could focus on the value that we were adding on top, because again, ETL was not our core business. And so we realized that the challenges that our clients were facing on the agency side were not unique to them. It was something that was happening across the nonprofit and NGO world. And so we started focusing our energy on the data infrastructure that we had built on the analytical side. And we ended up creating kind of the first donor data platform that's really built to handle this, to aggregate that data, to visualize and identify, and then ultimately to be able to deploy, sync that data back into other systems. And then we're doing a lot with generative AI for content production, for explainability, and then have models that are feeding even more, advanced use cases on top of that. And so we've been able to build this platform, and Airbyte is just behind the scenes, keeping the data moving, keeping all the little status indicators green, so that we can actually build our product on top of that. And so that's been huge for us, just not having to mind that side of things directly. And then it lets the organizations that we serve build better relationship, raise more funds, and ultimately do more good. And so that's what kind of got us excited, and sort of enabled us to take this and sort of build this downstream version of our data platform that previously was only available internally at NextAfter. And so we like to, we appreciate what Airbyte has done for us, but it also means that we want to give back. You'll see me in the Airbyte Community Slack quite a bit. Feel free, if anyone ever has a question about what we're doing in the nonprofit space, you can probably tell that I'm pretty passionate about that. Ping me. I'm also super active over on the Measure Slack community. So if you're more on the data and analytics side, that's an awesome place to check out as well. There's a bit of a waiting list to get in because they verify that people are actually real humans and all that. But find me, say hello. Would love to, hear a little bit about how other people are working. But I know, our goal here is to get a little bit more to a lot of the questions. But I do want to say, for everyone who has contributed, whether that is a docs fix, whether that's filing issues, whether that's helping someone else in the community, thank you, because we're all benefiting from the contributions that this community is making. And I hope that it inspires us to be a little bit more, illogical, a little more generous, both time, talent, and resources, so that we can make this world a little bit better place. So that's a little bit of background, and I'll throw it back to Tio for next time.
No, that was great. Thank you, Justin. I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but if you're being a data engineer, you're in your space, you get very focused on your industry, on your function, whatever it is you're looking to accomplish. So it's always fun seeing different ways people are leveraging their data and how they're contributing towards their industry, their customer stakeholders, and into their space. So love the deep dive into what you did with NextAfter and what you all are looking to do with Avid AI. I know when I first presented this, I kind of put it into thirds, right? Like, let's have you give the presentation. I'll ask you some questions, and then audience, I want you to go ahead and feel free to chime in as well. I'm going to pivot a little bit. So audience, feel free to chime in questions whenever you have in the chat. I'm going to go with the questions we have, and I'm going to prioritize yours. And so if for whatever reason, we find that you have a burning question right now, put it in there, and we're going to go ahead and try to get that to be the focus of the conversation. While you all are typing those, I figure I want to start with just your journey. You've been with us for quite a long time. I'd love to know from your perspective, what have been the most noteworthy changes for your experience as a user, a community member with Airbyte?
That's a great question. I feel like the two really stand out to me. One is just the how far the platform has come in terms of maturity, stability, reliability. I think that there have been a lot of little pieces that have contributed to that, but even the path of upgrading on OSS is so smooth now. It's something that we struggled early on, just maintaining, keeping things going, and innovation was happening fast. It was a young product, and now it feels very mature. We don't run into issues like that these days. Connector availability is great, and the quality has improved, and even within those marketplace connectors, we've just seen a lot of growth there. And then the other side that I would say is Builder. And this is one that I did not expect. When I first saw that, it was a little bit of an eye roll, because it was something that I'm like, I write custom connectors. I write this code. Yeah. Low code I got. Builder, I wasn't really there at first. and then seeing as we converted more connectors, how it democratized the ability for our team to maintain them, how it sped up the contributions internally to our connectors and let us quickly scaffold and build proof of concept and all of that. I am fully converted on that, and we do everything that we can wherever possible to keep our connectors 100% builder compatible. And that's easier and easier now that it will toggle to YAML when you do something a little bit custom for just that one section. But it's amazing for a junior on our team to be able to hop in, add a stream, and have it work the first time. I mean, that is magic. So I think that that's a big one for me, and one that I was surprised by, being familiar with building connectors and comfortable with that process. And now I don't have to do nearly as much of that work myself. It empowers our team.
Totally. We take care of the plumbing, like you said. Yeah. I think on that note, there's a lot of thoughtfulness you've put into how you build your data platform from scratch, right? Like you showed us your stack. Do you have any advice or frameworks that you recommend for others when they're taking on that same challenge for themselves?
Yeah, that's another good question. I feel like part of it is kind of keep it simple. Do the things that are unique to you, but try to outsource what you can. So if you're new to Kubernetes, don't worry about managing your pod groups. Use something like GKE Autopilot. It actually works really well with Airbyte. We've been really impressed by that. And it's one less thing to configure. It's one less thing to go out and work with. But even in a production deployment, you don't have to manage every piece of that. I think that another thing too is, it's really easy to go set up a cloud demo. This is something I always recommend to people where they're like, oh, I'm not sure. Just go set it up, build your custom connector there in Builder and, get your proof of concept nailed down, because that's so much easier to get internal buy-in. Because especially when you're collaborating with more traditional IT teams and things of that nature, often, once you start talking infrastructure, things slow down a lot. But once you have a proof of concept that shows this actually works, it's often much, much easier. And then I would say that the other piece of that too is that you don't have to do everything all at once. If you're dealing with a small set of sources, things like that, using the ABCTL version now is so easy to just get something up and running. And now, the work that you do to customize it actually translates across, where if you need to take it to Helm, now you can do that. You've already built that values.yaml, and I feel like that makes it much easier. You're not going to get stuck anywhere in that space now.
Totally. And speaking of like different components of building the platform, like focusing on what you know, and then taking advantage of certain tooling like our builder. I know there's been a number of questions in the chat. Marcos has gone ahead and also shared a link for a demo we're doing on our connector builder later. So I recommend anyone who wants to get their hands dirty and actually do it live, go ahead and sign up for that as well. That also kind of segues into another thing that I wanted to kind of pick your brain on or get your thoughts on, because we recognize we're always looking to improve the product further and further. And you've been a great member of the community. You've given that feedback, both the positive and the constructive. We want everyone to feel very free to give us the constructive, because we are looking to always improve. I think there's a component here where I'd love to get your thoughts as to what are you most excited about, what's coming next?
Yeah, I think that, as one of the areas that I think that has been really exciting to see is, the move toward like the CDC support and database connectors. That's something that historically hasn't been a big part of our pipeline, but is just now becoming, more and more something that we're having to work with. The nice thing is that we control most of our own infrastructure. We don't control as our sources, and that's the part that's already been lifted. I also think that there's a lot of things that I hope to see in the future. Things like reverse ETL that we're currently using elsewhere. I think that there's things that are kind of coming down the pipeline in terms of more support within low code that doesn't require building custom components. I think more and more of those cases are getting checked off, and so I would love to be at the point where I don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
And now I feel like we're there 90% of the time. And so each one of those like corner cases that gets handled of dealing with, APIs that don't return, data in JSON or things like that, that's easier and easier to solve for in low code. But I would love for one of my juniors to be able to do that on their own without having to build anything custom. So I'm excited about that. And then I do think that in the future, things that we would love to see in the platform are definitely reverse ETL. I think that there's a lot of opportunity, to be able to certain sources. It makes sense to do things like concurrent syncs within streams, or things that I think that are a little more wish list right now, and that maybe not prioritized, but that I think that one day Airbyte would be a great case for.
Love to hear it. We'll see what we do. We did have a question come in regarding how do you orchestrate your data pipelines that came in from Marty. Could you share a little bit on that?
Yeah, so right now we're triggering everything from within our own application. And a lot of that, there's a lot of logic for us having to do with dependency trees and things of that nature. And so we've done that in app up to this point. There's been a lot of discussion about, when we look to move that into dependency trees in like an Airflow or a Dagster or something like that. I've used both of those platforms helping other people with Airbyte. And so I think that there's a lot of room there. But right now, it's all very tightly coupled with how our data flows and application logic works. And so we are doing a lot on like matching of like data freshness and things like that to conditionally trigger. So right now, every job in our Airbyte that's part of the Avid platform is manually triggered, and it's triggered based on events that happen within the platform. And then from there, we have for internal processes, we'll use the internal scheduling, where we don't have that type of triggering logic.
Got it. That's excellent. Let me see. I see a little bit more chat activity. All right. I think we might have answered those ones. And I know we're getting in towards the end of time here, so I'm going to always do the last gas call. Closing time. Anyone else want to chime in over here? All right. With that said, I want to make sure I don't lose the opportunity to say, Justin, just thank you so much for your time here. Thank you for being an active part of our community. Hope to continue doing a lot of great work together. Everyone else, hope you were able to get a lot out of this experience. I know I certainly did. Looking forward to Avid AI, looking forward to everything else still to come. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks so much, y'all.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Feel free to reach out with questions.